Welcome back to Small Caps, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kerry Stevenson. Today I'm talking to Vernon Wills. He is the International Operations Director for Site Group International. The ASX code is SIT. Now, they're an interesting one, this one. They're a training services company. And for those of you that have been taking notice of the news recently, borders are opening up, students are coming back in, flooding back into Australia. But also globally, things are opening up and there's a real need not only for training, but good training and an understanding of different workforces. Now, Site Group International work in the resources, the construction and other industries, but it's quite big and some unusual ways that they've been doing business. So Vernon Wills, great to see you. Thanks for joining me on Small Caps. Are you Vern or are you Vernon?
Vern, Kerry. My mother called me Vernon when she was angry, and so I much prefer the Vern. Thank you.
I will say Vern then, because I'm not your mother and I don't want you to get angry. And I'm not angry. All right, let's talk about, because you're also the founder of this group. So I want to know, give us the overview of the company and then we'll get into, I guess, why our audience should be looking at you guys right now. So give us a brief overview.
Sure, thanks, Kerry. Yeah, look, the overview of the company is something that always excited me, and that was about training workforces. And the best place to train workforces are where the people are looking for work, predominantly in Australia, around the mining sector, the oil and gas industry, but offshore, substantial workforces coming from places like Philippines, and then other areas where the resources are located closely in some of the impoverished countries like Papua New Guinea, where people needed training and people needed training en masse. For example, Papua's got 9.5 million people, but it's got a very, very small skilled workforce. So the opportunities are quite large.
Papua New Guinea is interesting. Why Papua New Guinea? I mean, you just said because, 9.5 million people, but is it a little bit tricky to work up there?
No, I think it's quite the opposite. I mean, if you look at the resources in Papua, and I think we all know some of the big mines that are now producing quite well or coming back into production, there are significant opportunities with companies like K92 that have come into the workforce and come into the mining industry, producing substantial quantities of gold with great returns, but they need skilled workers to carry out all the facets of the mining. I can use the example of Saudi Arabia, for example, which is probably a little bit different, but the very, very exciting part about Saudi Arabia is 35 million people. They've been paid to stay at home for decades. Work was not something that was their considered role. Workforce was either expats at the senior level or expats at the junior level, and the expats at the junior level typically were your Indians, your Pakistanis, your Filipinos, your Nepalese, Egyptians, who would come in seeking work whilst the locals got paid to stay at home.
Oh, they got paid to stay at home in Saudi. So if you were a Saudi, you didn't go to work, you got paid to stay at home. But what you're saying is that's changing. And Site Group International, how are you involved, and how does that affect your bottom line?
So the remarkable thing about Saudi is it's always survived off its oil and gas, and I think the Saudi government, the Saudi people have come to the realisation that that's going to end at some time. The other thing about Saudi, if you haven't been there, it's a country of beautiful natural resources, of things like the Red Sea that's got lots of coral reefs and spectacular swimming areas. Some of the mountainous areas are very, very nice. And Saudi as a country has also come to the realisation that at the moment, Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Qatar are having all the fun. Qatar recently hosted the World Cup in soccer, and the shopping meccas of Dubai and Abu Dhabi and even Bahrain are extremely well known. The reality is that the Saudi government's now spending billions and billions of dollars on saying, okay, well, we're going to be the next tourist mecca. The rules and regulations for interaction between male and female has changed totally. So females are allowed to drive cars and go to work and do all the fun things that guys have been doing for a long, long while. But the major build out of substantial hotel resorts on Red Sea, some of the major projects that they're doing. In the last couple of weeks, the new Riyadh Air was announced, they're spending something like $100 billion just buying aircraft to start a new start airline, where they're going to buy ultimately 80, I think, a 787s just to commence. So they're very, very serious about getting into the marketplace in a big way. And that opens the door enormously for us, given that we've been in country now for over 10 years.
That was going to be my next question. How did an Australian company get the door open in Saudi, and what's it look like? Because I'm assuming, I'm talking to you in 23. Of course, we had the COVID lockdown, and that really hurt Site Group International, but you're coming back in a big way. The question I've got for you is, why Saudi, and how did you get in there? What's that market look like, and how did they accept you?
Sure, thanks, Kerry. I'll step back a little bit. In 2009, we took a lease, or Site took a lease on a 30-hectare piece of land, a former expo site in Clark, Philippines, where the former US Air Base was. And we took that piece of land and we built out a significant training centre with underground mines. We did with OceanaGold, GE turbines, safe flight process plants, electrical areas, some really quite amazing training facilities. The Saudis got wind of what we were doing, and they came and had a look back in 2011 and 2012. And that was great in its own right, because we could really show them what we were doing to bring on the local and national workforces for Philippines and surrounding countries. So that was a major part of the Saudis coming along to see what we did, why we did it, and why it was successful. That made the build out easy. When we went back to Saudi, we're now in business with companies like Saudi Aramco, LTS, SWIC, which is a Saline Water Commission company, and we're building out fire grounds, and we're building out training centres. The only slight difference I'll say from a shareholding perspective is, in our new model, we don't fund any of this anymore. We actually have it funded for us. So we don't pay for facilities, we don't pay for equipment. We come in with our curriculum, our competencies, our workforce, and our planning modules on how to localise and nationalise workforces. And that brings us out to the situation where in Saudi pre-COVID, we were training a couple of thousand people a year. We're going into the workforce with approximately 100% success rate. Now, Kerry, the other part that you just mentioned and touched on was COVID. I suppose you can get unlucky in life sometimes, and we picked the golden five for the first one, of course, was Saudi itself. We did keep the business open there for during the period, but the numbers sort of were down by about 60 to 70%. Bahrain, we were dealing with the Bahrain Society of Engineers. We actually exited the country and cancelled a new JV that we had in the country. Philippines, President Duterte certainly made sure that nobody got to go anywhere. You couldn't drive from Manila to Clark, let alone expats fly in. So it was a total lockdown. Papua New Guinea, we all know the results of COVID there were extremely high. And of course, the other world champion of lockdowns was our own country, Australia. We not only locked people in, we locked people out, be they Australians or be they other nationals trying to come to country.
So that was a pretty tough time for Site Group, and it'd be remiss of me not to say that pre-COVID you had revenues of about 30-odd million, and coming out of COVID with all these, as you said, Australia not only locked everyone else out, but locked us in, and you had the magic five. Your revenues went down substantially. Is it going to be easy for you now? Because it feels to me like there's even more of a need now for training facilities. So is now a time where Site Group International are going to be like rocket fuel? It's like you're back, but even bigger than before.
Yeah, look, I think the winds are definitely behind us. They're blowing the right way for us. If I look at where we were, as you mentioned, Kerry, we were circa 31 million in pre-COVID. We dropped down as low as 6-7 million in 2022. But now think a lot of the work that we were expecting to come on when COVID hit is actually now coming on in full force, particularly in Saudi at the moment. We have told the market that we're expecting that our 2025 revenues will be circa 17 million USD, or around 26, 27 million Aussie during that year. The area of Bahrain, which is right next door, we're back in negotiations with the Bahrain Society of Engineers and the company that we originally signed an agreement with in Bahrain. Basically, that's to replicate the Saudi model, because it's pretty clear in that region that the model has been very, very successful. And then we put into that with our international business, Philippines. We built the underground mine there with OceanaGold. We trained some 560 or 580 of their key staff and gave them one of the safest training environments and working environments in the industry. And then you come down to PNG, which I'm off to on Wednesday, to look at the restart of our safe-flight process plant operations and mining operations that have been somewhat dormant during the last couple of years. So that's the exciting part for us. On top of that, of course, we do have our Australian business, the Site Institute, which is Crycos students, and that segment of the industry is was circa 40 billion Australian dollars a year, about 5 billion in our home Queensland market, and that's very quickly growing back to that level, and we expect it will surpass it. In fact, our enrolments are showing that through 2024-25, we'll go back from a pre-COVID commencement rate of around about 300 candidates here. We'll have carriage for about 1,400 by mid-2025. So that's a pretty significant increase for us from a international student perspective.
Vern, going from 2019, as you said, pre-COVID, and then literally having the Magic 5 where it was like lockdown, shutdown, see you later, revenues decimated. Clearly, you're listed on the ASX. How do you scale back up? Because from what you've just said, this is a market that is not only opening up very, very quickly, but has quite a lot of pressure to open up quickly. How do you scale?
So, Kerry, during the time we haven't sat dormant, we've changed our model. Previously, we had leases around Australia and significant staff numbers, which are somewhat reduced. We're a lot more focused on the pure delivery of our localisation and nationalisation of workforce models. And if I talk about overseas, that's very simply training staff who are competent and capable of delivering our modules, and a customer base that historically accepted it and is more than willing to go the journey with us again now. So the change that we've got is a much trimmer, a much slimmer, a much more agile business, where our focus will be really much on delivery in country in those various countries. We've taken our growth plans to the market and said that it's your turn to fund it. We've got acceptance out of that, and the stage where site shareholders took the bet, if you like, in the early days to build the OceanaGold mine, which Oceana funded, but putting in the GE turbines and the safe flight process plants and all the things that we had at Clark for the benefit of industry. The model is slightly different now. We're going to industry and saying, you put the facilities in place and we'll show you how to do it. And that's where we're getting great acceptance. And it is a much more streamlined model than what we were before.
I think it's important also to note, and correct me if I'm wrong, you own the land at Clark, don't you? So that's an asset for the company.
Yes, it's an asset for the company. It's actually leasehold. Clark is a special economic zone. The whole area is being gazetted by the Philippine government to become the next CBD for Manila. And if you've ever been to Manila, it's one of those typical big Asian cities. It's 26, 27 million people. It's jammed. The airport can't take any more passengers. The roadways, there's new skyways and things like that, but you still get traffic jams. heaven forbid, don't go onto EDSA and sit there for 3 or 4 hours to get from one end to the other, because it's a nightmare. Whereas Clark the government's invested extensively on the new airport. Now the new airport handles 12 million. It's the former US Air Base airport, so it can take the very big planes. It doesn't flood. It doesn't close down during typhoons. It's a very safe airport, has been operating for well over 50 years. Then the government's also investing in new rail to come into Clark, so it'll be a railway that'll run from south of Manila all the way up through Clark, ultimately out to Subic Bay, up to Olongapo. So an expressway of infrastructure and brand new roadways that are around it. So the government is doing everything they can to turn Clark into that new CBD. The area itself is only 9,700 hectares, which is not a big area. About a third of that's airport. Then you've got about 5 significant golf courses, and then you've got roadways and everything else. So outside of 30 hectares is actually one of the or in fact it is the only 30 hectare site left in the area. The big changes that are happening in Clark from our perspective is government's backing it by extending leases. There's precedents for that. They're also extending what is called the floor area ratio, FAR, which is currently 1.25. That enables you to build a 2-storey building. And when they modify it to FAR 6, which is in their urban renewal plan, 6 to 8, that's anywhere from 26 stories up to about 34 stories. So the value of your land, your usage of your land becomes a lot more exciting, So the land in itself should be seen as an asset-backed play, which is one of the facets of this company, with the strength really being the tailwinds that are now coming in behind our training business, or businesses, Australia and international.
All right, so let's take a look at some of the numbers. Your shares, your market cap at the moment is about 5 mil. Your shares did drop due to COVID, but you're saying we're back. Not only are we back, but for example, the Saudi business alone, you're saying by 2025 could put 17 million USD on the bottom line. Am I right?
No, that's revenues.
That's revenues, sorry.
Revenues, yeah. So about 27 million Aussie. So the path there, Kerry, is we're climbing back towards that 31 very rapidly that we were doing previously, but we'll have much greater margins than we've ever experienced.
And have you got any debt at the moment?
We have got some debt. We're currently doing a 1-for-1 rights issue, and the purpose of that rights issue is to do 3 things. One's to remove the last bit of debt that we have. 2 is for the expansion of the domestic and international training businesses, which don't need a lot of money, particularly international. And the third one is the extension of leases and the usage of the Clark land. So we're going through that process at the moment.
All right, so go on.
Sorry, I was going to say on that, the Clark Development Corporation bought a grouping called Palafox, the urban renewal specialist. They did their urban renewal plan, and we've had the same people do our urban renewal plan to make sure that we align with what the expectations are of the government in Clark.
All right. Well, I'm just going to pick up on this and say, a 5 mil market cap, and what I'm picking up is the Saudi business alone, revenue of 17 million US, about 26 Aussie, is pretty interesting. Could that grow even more, do you think?
Yeah, look, we're of the view that we're extremely well placed with the customer base we've got. I mean, Saudi Aramco is probably most investors are aware that they just recorded the world's largest ever profit for a corporation, to some 261 billion. They are funding massive developments in country. The government's putting a huge amount of money in behind the Red Sea and other neon developments and other developments that are happening in country. We're fortunate enough to be one of the few providers in country. We're at the forefront, and we've got the track record. So it's really up to us to make the most of that. And so we're seeing some pretty exciting opportunities, and we expect to keep building that business quite significantly. We don't want to be a one-trick pony. We are also working on Bahrain and Philippines and PNG and everything else that we've done previously, because it really is important to understand this is not a new start. This is actually a restart, and we're coming back very strongly on the basis of what we've always done. It's something we know how to do. It's something we know how to do well, and our customers have been very, very loyal to us.
I think that's a really interesting point you make, and I'm going to ask you one final question before we wrap it all up. But I think it's interesting what you just said, which is this is not new; it's a restart. And I guess you were caught up in that terrible COVID lockdown, which really impacted you, and as a result, impacted the share price, impacted the market cap. But what you're saying is we can restart. We're restarting fast, and the growth is there. And you haven't been out talking because you've been just waiting to make sure that everything's in order. And so I'm really happy that you've come on to Small Caps to let our audience know what you're doing. But final question before we go to a wrap up. We've talked about Saudi, Bahrain, the Philippines, Papua New Guinea and Australia. Are you looking at other areas, or focus on that for now, do that growth, settle that, and then look at expansion again?
Kerry, one of the few benefits you get out of getting older is you learn what you're good at and what you're not. And look, we have looked at other countries in the past, and we've found some of those have been very, very hard to make a dollar out of. We think we've got this right. Certainly with Saudi and Bahrain, new opportunities coming up from new companies. If you look at the list of companies that are actually working in Saudi, they're substantial and they're loyal, and that we really appreciate. A bit the same as the Philippines in that way is the substantial investment made by OceanaGold gives us a great backdrop to build the business. OceanaGold will be back with us very shortly on redoing the programs that we were previously doing, and we're expecting to see GE with their $70 million piece of kit there in the stage 6B turbine coming back into full operation as well. So we've got plenty to work on that's paid for, and it's now up to us to get a real return out of that. And that's where the focus will be.
All right. Well, we've run out of time, Vern. So why don't you do this for me? Wrap it up and give us 3 reasons why our beautiful audience should be sitting up and taking notice of Site Group International, ASX code SIT, right now.
Thanks, Kerry. I think the 3 major elements I'll pick. First of all, the property back play. That's a real bonus for shareholders. We're only market capped at 5 million. I don't think it's hard to imagine that if we get that right, that the shareholders should be looking for a decent return out of property. The second one is based around primarily the fact that we're a restart, not a new start. And if I look at the Australian business with Site Institute, there's a significant flow of business heading to Australia right now. It's in record inquiries. We're building up new agencies for that on a weekly basis, and we have a large loyal base of agents who traditionally provide us with the students. And the final one is the one that I've been pitching on very heavily is the market of where we've been. It still exists. It hasn't gone away. Yeah. Just the borders shut. They're now open, and we're open for business. And we think we're going to get the benefits of what we lost.
Like someone said very famously, he's back. They're back. Site Group International, ASX code SIT, back in business. Founder and the International Operations Director, Vernon Wills. Thank you so much for joining me on Small Caps today, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, Kerry. Appreciate it very much.